This is Democracy Watch. So Mark, we obviously cover a lot of the threats to democracy, but this is one of those rare instances where we actually have a huge win to cover. So what's your take on this legislative map out of Wisconsin?
Look, this is great news for the people of Wisconsin. It's also great news for democracy across the country. The fact is, we talk a lot about the challenges that we face to fair districts, the challenges we face to democracy. And periodically, it's important to keep in mind that when we fight, we can win. When the people rise up in favor of free and fair elections, when they insist on fair maps, eventually they'll win. This fight in Wisconsin has been going on for a decade. For a decade, several cases went up and down the courts, but people didn't give up. There were elections, but people didn't give up. Finally, the Supreme Court of Wisconsin flipped from majority conservative to majority liberal. New court issued an order. That all of a sudden caused the Republicans to decide that they can live with the governor's map because they were afraid of something worse, not because they believe in democracy, by the way, but because they were fearful. And as a result, the people of Wisconsin will now, for the first time in more than a decade, vote under something approaching fair maps. Good news for democracy.
All right, so let's talk about those maps themselves. Specifically, I guess, what is the current breakdown of the state Senate and Assembly, and what could it be with this new map in place?
Yeah, so, this just goes to show you how crazy the gerrymander was in Wisconsin. We sometimes talk about the Wisconsin legislature being about the most gerrymandered place in the country, and it has been. And so in what is really a 50-50 state, right? You've got a Democratic governor, one Democratic senator, you've got one Republican senator. Joe Biden won it last time narrowly. Donald Trump won it last time before that narrowly. The current Senate map was 22 Republicans and 10 Democrats. Think about that. 22 Republicans and 10 Democrats. The current Assembly map was 66 Republicans and 35 Democrats. Essentially, Republicans had more than nearly 2/3 of the seats in the state Senate and legislature, notwithstanding the fact that the popular vote is 50-50, actually slightly leaning towards Democrats. The new map, look, elections matter, candidates matter. So when we say what the new map will be, these are leans, but you got to run good candidates, you got to run good races. The new map could be 18 Democrats and 15 Republicans and a 50-49 map with one more Republican seat in the Assembly. So both of them move to roughly toss-ups. The Assembly, a slight lean Republican, the Senate, a slight lean Democrat. But it's going to be down to elections, which is what you want in a democracy. You want candidates to matter.
Yeah. It wouldn't be an episode of Democracy Watch without the usual worry about whether Republicans can pull some tricks here and maybe sue to delay the enforcement of this map.
You like suffer from PTSD or something, man, because you are always trying to figure out how Democrats are going to get screwed.
It's like a Xanax commercial over here.
We could do this as two Jews on anxiety.
That's right. Yeah.
But in all seriousness, look, this is done. This was a bill that was passed by the legislature, signed by the governor. It's done. It's a lot like when we were talking about the Louisiana maps. This was a legislative enactment. This was signed by the governor. This is the new law. The old map no longer exists. The old map has been repealed. The new map is the law of the land in Wisconsin.
Can you talk about the possibility that did exist, which you had alluded to before, of the governor not signing this map into law and instead trying to push for something that was even more favorable to Democrats? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So look, as I said before, Robin DeVos and the Republicans in Wisconsin are as bad as they get. They are as partisan as they get. They are no, heroes or compromisers. These are hardcore MAGA types. But they were facing the likelihood that the Wisconsin Supreme Court, that had already said that a new map had to be drawn, was going to pick among a series of alternatives, some of which were much more favorable to Democrats. So in some ways, this was cutting their losses to go to a fair map, at the risk that the court would adopt a fair but a more favorable Democratic map. But this is a day for celebration for Democrats. This was a win for the governor. It was a win for Democrats in the state. And it means that candidates and campaigns are going to matter, that Democrats are not guaranteed the majority in either chamber. Republicans are not guaranteed a majority in either chamber. It's going to come down to the voters, as it should. And I am confident that when the right-wing, crazy MAGA Republican candidates run against the sensible Democrats will take control of the legislature.
Now, I do want to talk about congressional maps here. First of all, I should mention for anybody watching that Marc's firm is representing the plaintiffs in that congressional map case. So just as an aside, to support the work that Marc and his team do day in and day out for democracy, including right there in Wisconsin, the best way to do that is to sign up for Democracy Docket. That is the free news outlet that Marc founded that focuses on everything voting and elections. So I'll put the link on this screen and in the post description of this video. It is an amazing resource that I use on a daily basis. So again, your firm is representing the plaintiffs in the congressional map case. What's the status on that?
So that case we filed directly in the Supreme Court. It is an effort to reopen, again, the maps, just like what happened in the legislative case. This is a parallel case for congressional. We are waiting on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court to rule whether or not it will order a redraw of the congressional map, and it should. The fact is that the Wisconsin congressional delegation right now is 6 Republicans and 2 Democrats. Again, this is crazy. This is in a 50-50
right,
state.
A 50-50 state.
It's a 50-50 state. You have a 75%, 25%, split between Republicans and Democrats. There's no way Wisconsin should have a 6-2 map. So I'm hopeful that the Wisconsin Supreme Court will reopen this now that it has overturned the precedent that essentially underpins this map, but we will keep you informed.
Zooming out a little bit, just on the legislative maps being overturned, what does this win mean, given how egregiously gerrymandered that state was?
Okay, so this is my message to everybody. When the cynics tell you that litigation won't matter, don't believe them. When they tell you that there's no way that you'll ever force Republicans to enact fair maps or back away from voter suppression, don't believe them. The Republicans want you to believe the cynics. Sometimes the cynics come in the form of so-called smart people on the left, but don't believe them, because the fact is, when we fight, when we keep up the pressure, we may not win in year 1, we may not win in year 2, it may not be a clear path from point A to point B, but in the end, if we persevere through it all, this shows that democracy can win. And that's why this is such an important win, not just for Wisconsin, but around the country.
Perfectly put. Let's end with this. If Wisconsin's maps are now on the brink of fair, what's the next state that takes up the mantle of the most anti-democratic state, the most anti-democratic maps?
Oh my God! I mean, this is like
how much time you got?
Competition. How much time you got? I'm gonna throw one out there for you and say North Carolina.
That's what I figured.
You and I have talked about North Carolina before, and we should probably dedicate an episode to be people up to date on North Carolina. But in a nutshell, North Carolina went from having some of the fairest maps in the country drawn by the legislature. They tried so hard to undo those fair maps. They went to the U.S. Supreme Court to try to impose the fringe independent state legislature theory. When that failed, they managed through judicial elections to essentially overturn all of the fairness precedent in the state. And they have now adopted what are probably the most overtly partisan gerrymandered maps in the country. It's a real disservice to the people of North Carolina. My law firm is suing currently under to sue the congressional maps for violating, for being racial gerrymanders. There are lawsuits pending about the state legislative maps. You could find all of those on Democracy Docket.
And by the way, just to your earlier point, for anybody who's despairing about what's happening in North Carolina, look at what's happening right now in Wisconsin to give you some, to serve as some consolation for the fact that this may work for one small moment for Republicans, but just like what happened in Wisconsin now, in Michigan, and in a number of states across the country, I mean, including the states that have been rectified, like Louisiana, Alabama, that we've talked about throughout this entire series, like this won't stand for as long as Republicans hope it will. Also, to Marc's point, you know, with the work that he's doing right now in states like North Carolina and Wisconsin, again, the best way to support him and his team is to sign up for Democracy Docket. Links on this screen. It's also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.